In my discussion or forum, I always have a section called How Am I Doing? And I encourage students to put information in there about the class. What do they like about it, or what might they like to see changed? Let me tell you a funny thing that happened about my section in the discussion that said, How am I doing? I had a student one time who wrote back to me and said, I'm doing fine. I had a cold last week, but I'm feeling a lot better now. That made me laugh, and I wanted to share that with you. When I ask for feedback from my students, this gives me more information about possible revisions for the class. It tells me what's going well that might not need to be revised, or it shows where there's some questions and where I might need to add more handouts, more explanation, more video. Now, you may be wondering how I get students to reply to this, because I guarantee you not 100% of my students will reply to how am I doing. But when a student does reply, I write back to them and copy the whole class. And I say thank you to Jeremy or Susan about what they said about the class. And then I again encourage the others in the class to add their own comments. When you encourage students to ask questions, two things happen. First of all, you get to know the student better, and you get to know their level of understanding. So if they're asking a lot of questions on one topic, maybe they need some additional help from you. Those questions and your answers help to move the discussion along as well. And I always try to answer my students' questions and relate what they've said and more of our content to real world scenarios. If I know my students' career goals, and most of them I do from our first weeks together, I try to relate that particular content or that particular lecture to their career goals. It's important for them to know why they're learning. Encouraging questions can also help to build that learning community. Get the whole class involved in answering some of these questions and in looking at the real world scenarios. Now I'm going to share a little trick or a tip with you. This is something that I do when I'm encouraging my students to ask questions. Many of the questions I find after I've taught the course for a time or two are generally the same. So when I have a little bit of extra time, I write pre-written answers and I attach another question to expand their thinking. So if there's one area that students are asking a lot of questions about, I might write out 5 or 6 answers. That way I can quickly slide in one of those, saving myself some time, but it also allows students to start thinking together and working together to come up with the answer to my second question. Make sure that you don't repeat those questions, though, because students will share that information with each other. So just take a little bit of time and think about where you might want to encourage students to expand their thinking. Focus on the content can be a little time-consuming on your part, but it really is worthwhile. What I like to do is search for YouTube videos or even TED Talks that expand on the topic that the student is learning. It gives a whole new dimension to the content. You might even want to look at the news that's happening that week and see if anything in the news relates to that content. So by focusing on the content, you're taking it from the classroom to the real world. Focusing on the content for this class usually took place through YouTube videos that I gave you or even TED Talks. These expanded the content. It gave you another person's viewpoint. For instance, learning about Bloom's taxonomy. I'll bet you never thought you'd hear that from Seinfeld. At first glance, number 9 may look a lot like number 8, but let me help you understand. There's no question that we have certain content that needs to be covered each week and in each module. But what we need to do with expanding the thinking is to scaffold the students' understanding up to higher and higher levels. We want to present students, as I did say before, with a variety of ideas and very different perspectives on that content. The goal is to build the basic concept in their minds and then help them think about it from different perspectives. You may be aware of Bloom's taxonomy. There's several different levels of Bloom's that expands the thinking from knowledge all the way up to synthesis. By increasing your questions and using the words from those various parts of Bloom's, that's exactly what you're doing. So this week, I gave you a fun video that is Jerry Seinfeld trying to explain Bloom's taxonomy. I hope that video will help you better understand how you might expand your thinking with your students. I have already given a lecture on ending the class, but as a best practice, this bears repeating. In the final weeks of the class, students are stressed and they're worried. They have a huge project to do, they have one last paper to do, they may have a final exam. So if you can help them by giving them a few more steps, maybe an announcement that really is just a to-do list that says step by step what needs to be done in the final project. Now that's probably already listed in your assignment, but if you can just outline it in a step-by-step manner, that might be helpful to the student. If you're giving a final exam, this is a good time then to give a very strong overview. The encouraging words you can give to them, letting them know they already have the knowledge that they need to get a good grade on the final exam, can be very helpful at this time. Remember, as I stated in an earlier lecture, a well-designed end of the course provides the opportunity for reflection and the integration and synthesis of the new knowledge. The final weeks of the class will also show you what students have learned and what they're taking away from your course. There's a shift in online education today that allows us to see each one of our students as an individual, but also to see those individuals as contributors to the learning community. As online education continues to grow and expand both here in the United States and globally, we have a new opportunity to expand and improve our list of best practices.